I noticed my camera lenses were missing gifts from my late grandfather. My sister-in-law smirked. They work better for my art. My wife laughed. You barely used them. I went to the collector's boutique where she sold them. The owner said she had permission. I asked, from who? He showed me a signed letter from my wife that said, when I walked through the front door, the house smelled like dust and sea salt. My boots were still damp from the docks, my duffel bag heavy with salt-crusted clothes and scattered data drives. I'd just returned from a 4-week oceanic expedition off the Oregon coast, charting the migratory patterns of deepwater squid. It had been grueling, beautiful, and exactly the kind of work that reminded me why I became a marine biologist in the first place. What I didn't expect to come home to was a theft. The lenses were gone. I noticed it the moment I walked past the bookshelf in the office. A display case once filled with my grandfather's vintage camera lenses now sat empty. Just dust outlines and a couple of displaced screws. My stomach twisted. I stood there, staring at the void where they used to be. These weren't just any lenses. They were rare, some pre-war German glass. All of them still functional. My grandfather, an amateur photographer with a fondness for landscapes and light leaks, left them to me when he passed. They were mine. More than that, they were sacred. Marissa? I called out, my voice clipped. From the kitchen, she answered. In here. I walked in. She was at the island, slicing cucumbers like it was any other Tuesday. Nicole, her sister, sat across from her with a glass of white wine and a shit-eating grin on her face. I noticed the lenses are gone, I said. Marissa didn't even pause. Oh yeah? Nicole needed them for a project. Nicole smirked and took a sip of her wine. They fit my art better, you know? I blinked. Excuse me. They're just sitting there, Evan, Marissa said, like she was reciting lines from a brochure. You hardly used them anyway. My jaw tensed. They belonged to my grandfather. Nicole leaned back in her chair. You're being dramatic. They're lenses, not a shrine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I didn't argue. I just walked out, got into my truck, and drove to one of the only vintage camera boutiques left in the city. The shop owner, a lanky guy with a ponytail and thin-rimmed glasses, remembered Nicole right away. She said her husband authorized the sale. Even had a signed letter. Marissa something, he said, handing me a scan of the document. There it was, my wife's signature, along with a detailed list of items Nicole had pawned for art funding. I stared at the paper. My name wasn't mentioned once. She sold them all? I asked. Not all. A couple are still here, behind the counter. I thought about calling you, honestly. It felt off. He slid over a small velvet pouch. I unzipped it, and there it was, a Zeiss 50mm lens with a hairline crack in the paint, just the way my grandfather used to describe it. One of my favorites. Can you hold them? I asked. He nodded. I'll even notarize the sale record, if you want. You'll probably need it. As I drove home, the scan of that letter sat on the passenger seat. I didn't feel anger exactly. What I felt was colder. Harder. Like something had cracked open inside me. It wasn't just the theft that got to me. It was the way they dismissed it. Like my grandfather's legacy meant nothing. Like I didn't matter. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Something that wouldn't go back. The silence in our house wasn't new, but it had changed. It wasn't the comfortable quiet that comes from two people content to be in the same room without speaking. It was loaded. Sharp. Like the pause between lightning and thunder. I sat across from Marissa at dinner, pushing a piece of grilled chicken around my plate. She scrolled through her phone, one hand wrapped around a wine glass, not even pretending to engage. Nicole was gone, thankfully, off to some artist retreat in Sedona. But her fingerprints were still all over my life. I tried to speak twice that night. Both times, I stopped myself. What would I even say? That she'd signed away my grandfather's lenses without so much as a text? That her sister had turned something personal into cash, and she'd smirked through the whole thing? Instead, I started gathering proof. Back in the office, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. I pulled screenshots from Nicole's Instagram, one in particular where she wore the Zeiss lens as a necklace, dangling from a gold chain like it was a thrift store trinket. I saved the boutique's scanned copy of the sales letter, highlighting Marissa's signature. I even snapped a photo of the lens the owner gave back to me, sitting in the palm of my hand like a memory made solid. Next, I called the shop owner again. Evan, right? He said. That's me. I'm going to need copies of everything Nicole sold. Serial numbers, receipts. If you can notarize the sale document too, I'd appreciate it. Already done, he replied. Didn't sit right with me either. Thank you, I said. He paused. She really sold them without your permission? Not legally, but she used my wife's name. That's going to matter soon. I ended the call and saved the files onto a USB drive. Then I sent everything to my personal email, created a backup folder, and labeled it Lenses Proof of Ownership. I didn't feel better, but I felt steady, like I had my feet under me for the first time since walking back into this house. The next day, I asked around at the university. I didn't need just any lawyer, I needed someone ruthless but quiet. Someone who knew how to handle small-scale betrayal with the precision of a scalpel. That's how I met Janet Marsh. She was recommended by my colleague, Dan, a geologist who had once fended off a lawsuit from a bitter ex-business partner. She doesn't yell, he said. She just builds a case so tight, the other side suffocates before they even get to court. Her office was small and clean. When I finished explaining, she tapped her pen once against the desk and said, "That was theft." I thought so too. She leaned back in her chair. "You could confront them now. But if you really want results, quiet revenge works better than angry declarations." I nodded. She smiled, thin and knowing. "Good. Then let's begin." I came home the next evening to the sound of waves outside our waterfront window and the clink of ice in Marissa's glass. The place looked exactly like I left it, quiet, clean, curated, like a showroom instead of a home. She sat curled up on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling through some decor blog on her tablet. "You'd think nothing had happened." "Hey," she said, not looking up. I stood in the entryway, staring at her for a second. "We need to talk." That got her attention. She set the tablet down slowly, as if bracing herself for something annoying, not important. "I want my grandfather's lenses back. All of them." Marissa blinked. "Evan, I know where Nicole sold them. I know about the letter. I know you signed it." She didn't deny it. Just sighed, like I'd asked her to run to the store during a rainstorm. "She needed them more than you," she said. "She's actually creating something with them." I blinked. "You're serious?" "She's working on an installation, Evan. You never even touched those lenses." I felt something splinter in me. Not explode, just crack, right down the middle. A fracture between who we used to be and whatever this had become. "And I needed a partner," I said quietly. "Not a broker." She rolled her eyes. "Come on." I didn't. I walked down the hall, straight into the guest room, and closed the door. That room had always been the catch-all space, half storage, half neglected second office. But that night, it became my bunker. I pulled out boxes, drawers, shelves, anything that held something personal or valuable. I started cataloging it all. Grandpa's journals. A pocket knife with his initials carved in the handle. Old dive watches, faded expedition notes, even a leather-bound logbook from the Galapagos trip back in college. I spread them out on the bed, photographing each one. I opened a spreadsheet, started labeling items, estimated value, notes on location, whether they'd ever left the house. If something had, I flagged it. I didn't trust her anymore. Not with memories. Not with heirlooms. Not with anything. Outside the room, I heard the faint clatter of silverware being cleaned up. She didn't come to the door. Didn't ask what I was doing. I guess that was the new arrangement, me locking doors and her pretending not to notice. That night, I slept with the guest room door locked. And when I woke up, I knew one thing for sure. I was going to protect what remained. Even if that meant protecting it from my own wife. It was mid-afternoon when Nicole showed up unannounced. I was home alone. Marissa had gone to her yoga class, some overpriced boutique studio with cucumber water and mood lighting. I was in the guest room, cataloging old dive knives and labeling storage bins, when I heard the front door open. I didn't even bother stepping out. I just waited. Sure enough, a few seconds later, heels clicked down the hallway like this was her house. She walked in without knocking, arms crossed, lips curved in that smug little smile she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. "Don't worry," she said, already halfway into the room. "I'm not here to take anything." But there it was, swinging from her neck. One of my grandfather's rarest lenses looped onto a brass chain like some flea market pendant. I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed. Calm. Controlled. "You know that's stolen, right?" Nicole tilted her head. "Please." "Marissa said I could keep this one. It's practically a gift." "No," I said, standing up slowly. "It's evidence." She frowned. "Excuse me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Tapped record. Nicole's smile dropped a fraction. "Say that again?" I said, lifting the phone slightly. "About Marissa giving you that lens?" "You're not serious," she said, suddenly still. "You're not." "Nicole," I cut in. "Do you understand what you've done? You forged paperwork. You sold stolen property. And now you're walking around with one of the stolen items around your neck." Her face turned a shade paler. "You're bluffing," she snapped, but her voice wavered. "You wouldn't." I took a step closer, still recording. "You don't think I've already documented the sales? Photographed everything? That I don't have notarized proof of what you sold and who signed off?" She stared at the lens, then yanked it from around her neck and hurled it onto the floor. It bounced once, then rolled under the edge of the dresser. "Take it," she spat. "You're insane." Then she stormed out, slamming the front door behind her. I stopped the recording, saved it, and sent it to Janet within seconds. 5 minutes later, her reply came through. "That's the leverage we needed." And just like that, the game shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building a case. And Nicole had just handed me the crown jewel. I didn't wait another day. That same night, I opened a new checking account with a freelance business I'd let go dormant. Technically, it was still registered under my name from when I did consulting work during grad school. I reactivated the EIN and began transferring money out of our joint account in small, quiet doses, just enough to avoid red flags. I funneled it into the freelance account and flagged every transfer as marine consulting reimbursement. Marissa never noticed. She rarely checked the account unless it was time to book a spa trip or transfer money to Nicole. I opened a P.O. box downtown, away from the house and close to the university. All our important documents, bank statements, legal notices, anything tied to my name, would be rerouted there. I changed the mailing address on every account I could think of: the mortgage, the insurance, my health coverage, even my dive certification renewals. It was slow work. Precise. I kept a list and checked off each step with the same focus I brought to expedition planning. The difference was, this time, I wasn't diving into open water, I was climbing out of it. I spent a full afternoon scanning mortgage papers and car titles. Everything with my name on it went into encrypted cloud storage and also got emailed to Janet. I labeled the subject line, Asset Protection, Evan L. She replied within minutes. Perfect. Keep going. The more you control, the less they can touch. That evening, I came home to candles and filet mignon. Marissa stood in the kitchen wearing a navy blue dress I hadn't seen in months. A bottle of my favorite red wine was breathing on the counter. Jazz was playing low on the speakers. She smiled like nothing had happened. Thought I'd surprise you. You've been so quiet lately. I didn't sit down. You stole from me, I said plainly. Her smile froze, just for a second, before she forced it back. Don't be ridiculous. It was just... Stop, I cut in. She blinked. You forged a letter. You let your sister profit off something you knew mattered to me. Marissa set down the wine glass, her fingers trembling just enough to notice. Can we just have one night without this drama? I stepped past her and walked to the guest room. Dinner stayed untouched. The next morning, I drove to the police station on 4th and Harbor and filed a formal report. The detective's name was Karen Suarez, mid-40s, smart eyes, no time for small talk. I gave her everything: notarized documents, video proof, Nicole's posts, the letter, the receipts. This is more than a domestic dispute, she said, flipping through the folder. This is documented theft. We'll open a case file immediately. By the time I left the station, I felt lighter. Marissa wanted normalcy. Wanted me to slip back into whatever quiet compliance made her life easier. But I wasn't her backup plan anymore. And now, with law enforcement involved and my finances protected, I wasn't just walking away from the fire. I was leading it back to them. It started quietly. Detective Suarez called me the next afternoon. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I caught the shift in tone when she said, "We brought both Marissa and Nicole in for questioning today." She didn't say arrested. Not yet. But it was enough. I thanked her and packed a small duffel bag. I didn't go home. Instead, I checked into a tiny artist hostel a few blocks from Pike Place. It was the kind of place that smelled like old wood and coffee grounds, filled with people who wore paint-splattered jeans and spoke in broken sleep schedules. No one cared who I was. No one knew I was hiding from anything. I left my phone charging in the corner while I showered, the water rust orange from aging pipes. When I came back, I had 5 missed calls, all from Marissa. Then Nicole. I didn't call either of them back. Instead, I sent everything Detective Suarez had requested: metadata from the photos, location timestamps, even screenshots of the listing where Nicole tried to resell one of the lenses online. It was posted on a rare photography forum under a fake name, but the email was traceable. Janet had helped connect the dots. That night, while sipping bitter coffee from a chipped ceramic mug, my phone buzzed again. Dylan calling. I hesitated. Dylan was a mutual friend, someone I'd worked with on a few university outreach programs. Neutral territory. I picked up. "Evan," he said immediately, voice low. "Just a heads up, Nicole's freaking out." I didn't answer. She came into my office an hour ago. Pacing. Said you were ruining her life. But then she slipped. She said Marissa was about to drop a bomb on you. My stomach clenched. "What kind of bomb?" I asked. She wouldn't say, Dylan replied. "Just that things were about to get complicated. Thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up. The next thing I did was simple but important. I changed every password I had. Banking, cloud storage, personal email, even my utilities. 2-factor authentication. Biometric lock. Everything. Then I logged into my bank account. There it was, a flagged attempt to access it that morning from an unfamiliar IP. Someone had tried to reset my security questions using Marissa's birthday as the anchor point. She was testing the perimeter. Not just emotionally, but digitally. I sat there in the fading light of the hostel's front lobby, my laptop warm on my legs and my jaw tight. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was intrusion. Sabotage. I wasn't dealing with someone who made a mistake. I was dealing with someone who was trying to cover her tracks, while still trying to take what was left of mine. And with Detective Suarez digging deeper by the hour, I knew we were only a few moves away from everything coming to the surface. I was walking along the waterfront when Suarez called. It was one of those brittle Seattle mornings, gray sky, gulls screeching over the piers, a cold breeze that made your knuckles ache. I had just grabbed coffee from the corner cart when my phone buzzed. "This is Detective Suarez." Her voice was clipped, urgent. "You were right to start a file when you did," she said. "Nicole didn't just pawn your lenses. She opened a business account last year using your name and social security number." I stopped walking. "What?" "She listed herself as the authorized user," Suarez continued, "and charged over $6,000 in art supplies, gallery rentals, equipment. The paper trail is a mess, but the billing address led us to a P.O. box on Lake City Way." I hadn't rented any P.O. box on Lake City Way. "You're sure it was in my name?" "We pulled the application. It has your name, your SSN, your date of birth. The signature is forged, but convincingly. And the email listed on the bank's alerts belongs to Marissa." I stared out at the sound. A boat horn wailed in the distance. "This isn't just theft anymore," Mr. Langston Suarez said. "This is conspiracy. Identity fraud. Possibly mail fraud, too, depending on what was received at that box." My voice came out low. "They were both in on it." "Looks that way." There wasn't much left to say. She promised to send me the updated case notes and recommended I freeze my credit and file with the FTC. I told her I already had. After we hung up, I didn't go back to the hostel. I drove south instead, 4 hours through winding roads and rain until I reached my brother's cabin near Mount Hood. He wasn't there. He'd offered it to me once as a retreat, a quiet space to work when Seattle got too loud. I'd never taken him up on it until now. I let myself in and sat down at the heavy-wood dining table. The silence was different here, heavy but honest. I pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote 2 sentences. "You knew, and you did it anyway." I left the note on our bed. Not my bed. Not anymore. When I drove out the next morning, I didn't take much. Just a backpack, my laptop, and the box of lenses the boutique owner had returned. Everything else, furniture, dishes, framed photos of a life I no longer recognized, I left behind. For the first time in weeks, I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. They had already crossed the line. And now, I wasn't coming back. Not until the law caught up to them. Not until they faced what they built, lie by lie, under my name. 2 weeks passed. I stayed in the cabin the whole time. No TV, no radio, no internet beyond what I needed to send updates to Janet and Suarez. I split firewood, made instant coffee, and stared out at fog-drenched pines. Silence became my routine. Solitude became the medicine. Then one afternoon, I heard the crunch of gravel outside. It wasn't a car pulling up. It was a mail carrier. The man handed me a thick envelope with a cold, professional smile. "Certified. You got a sign for it." I already knew what it was. Inside, divorce papers. Marissa had filed. I scanned the front page and saw the line that made me pause. "Irreconcilable differences. Petitioner requests sole ownership of marital residence." She was making a move, trying to spin the narrative. Paint herself as the wronged party. Classic. I laughed just once. No rage. No sadness. Just the humorless sound of someone watching a losing gambler double down with nothing left in their hand. That evening, Suarez called. Her voice was steady, but this time there was an edge of satisfaction to it. "We made the arrest," she said. Nicole had been picked up outside her apartment. 4 counts: identity fraud, wire fraud, possession of stolen property, and falsifying financial documents. Bail denied. "She lost it," Suarez said, almost amused. Started blaming Marissa mid-interview. Claimed she was the mastermind. Said she was just following her lead. "And Marissa?" I asked. "We're building the case. She'll be next." I didn't say anything right away. I just looked out the cabin window, watching the wind move through the trees like water. Suarez added, "By the way, we found another account Nicole opened in your name. Smaller, but it links back to a gallery rental 3 months ago. Another thread we're pulling." "Thank you," I said. 2 days later, I returned to Seattle for the first time since leaving. I didn't go home. Instead, I parked across from the Crab Pot downtown, a noisy seafood spot with dock views and a clear line of sight to a trendy restaurant across the street. At 7:13 p.m., Luke, Marissa's brother, stepped outside that restaurant with 3 friends, all laughing. I stayed in my car, engine off, watching. A black SUV pulled up. 2 plainclothes officers exited. They moved in quick. Luke barely got a word out before they cuffed him. One of his friends stumbled backward, stunned. The others just froze. I watched in silence as Luke, still half smiling in disbelief, was walked to the SUV and driven away. He didn't know I was there. Neither did Marissa or Nicole. They thought I was gone. But I was still gathering, still documenting, still watching from the shadows as the walls they built, on my name, my legacy, finally began to collapse. The courthouse smelled like dry air and old paper. It was the kind of place where time moved slower, where words mattered, and silence weighed more than shouting. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy suit that still felt foreign on me, watching Nicole fidget 2 rows ahead, her hair a mess and her jaw clenched tight enough to splinter bone. Marissa sat beside her, arms folded, eyes bloodshot. They hadn't looked at me once. The district attorney opened with the timeline. Over the course of 14 months, the defendants conspired to remove personal property, commit financial fraud, and engage in identity theft against the plaintiff, Mr. Evan Langston, without his consent or knowledge. He laid out the case in layers, documents notarized, photos timestamped, receipts traced, emails linked. Janet had been methodical. Suarez had provided everything else. I provided the rest. When it was my turn, I stood before the court and spoke with the same calm I used explaining squid migration models to freshmen. Only this time, I wasn't teaching. I was remembering, recounting. I trusted them, I said, voice steady. Marissa was my wife. Nicole, my sister-in-law. They weren't strangers. They were my family. I pulled up a photo on the courtroom screen. Nicole wearing my grandfather's Zeiss lens around her neck, smiling like she'd won something. That lens, I said quietly, was a gift from my grandfather. He died 7 years ago. I used to carry that lens on research trips like a good luck charm. A pause. Then, they sold it for $90. Gasps weren't allowed in court, but the tension was a current in the room. The defense was a circus. Nicole's lawyer claimed she'd been manipulated by Marissa, coerced into signing the forms. Marissa's attorney insisted she was unaware of the scope of her sister's actions, that she never intended harm. But the emails told a different story. So did the video. So did the bank statements and the P.O. box rental under Marissa's email. And so did Nicole, when she threw her sister under the bus trying to save herself. The judge didn't even hesitate. Nicole, 2 years, no parole. Restitution ordered. Marissa, a longer sentence, 3.5 years, with restitution and court supervision. The judge used the word calculated when describing her actions. And then he said something I'll never forget. Your violation wasn't just financial. It was emotional. You turned trust into currency and spent it until nothing remained. When the gavel dropped, I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumphant. Just hollow. Outside, Janet clapped me on the shoulder. You got what you needed, she said. Maybe, I answered. In truth, I didn't know what I felt. Relieved? Vindicated? All I really knew was that something closed inside me. Like a chapter I'd kept rereading, hoping the ending would change. But this time, it ended how it should. With the truth written down. And the people who tried to bury it finally forced to carry its weight. 6 months later, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I used to wear, familiar in shape, but stiff at the seams. Every room echoed with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the echo of things unsaid, of memories stripped down to drywall and shadows. I sold it in October. Used the equity and my inheritance credit from Grandpa's estate to push the balance into my name alone before listing. Marissa had tried to claim half in the divorce filing, but the court sided with the evidence. She walked away with a restitution plan and a record. I walked away with the deed. And then I walked away from the life we'd built together, too. Seattle wasn't home anymore, but legacy still mattered. So I stayed local. Rented a small studio near the University District, with high ceilings and terrible plumbing. It was perfect. I called it Farsight Vintage. Half wildlife photography studio, half restoration gallery. One side displayed photos from my ocean expeditions, kelp forests, deep-sea creatures, humpback migrations. The other side offered camera restoration services for vintage equipment. Lenses just like my grandfather's. I had the old Zeiss lens mounted in a glass case at the front counter. A note below read. Used, scratched, and irreplaceable. The most honest things always are. Business came slowly at first, but the place had soul. And word spread. I started getting visits from quiet artists, old-school hobbyists, students who wanted to shoot film on something older than their parents. I didn't smile much back then, but I started sleeping through the night again. That was enough. Then one afternoon in December, I walked in after lunch and found a package sitting on the front counter. No return address. Just a thin black box with my name written in neat, looping cursive. I unwrapped it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a lens. Not just any lens. The rarest one. The last of my grandfather's set. The 1960 Summicron with the red dot marking. I knew it by heart. I'd searched for it endlessly after the theft, convinced Nicole had sold it to someone out of state. But here it was. Untouched. Pristine. Home. There was no note. No explanation. Just the lens, and the weight of everything it had meant, returned without a word. I sat down behind the counter, held it in my hands, and felt the emotion swell in my chest like a wave. No anger. No bitterness. Just grief. And peace. And gratitude that, somehow, the world had a strange way of circling back. I cried alone in that shop, the afternoon sun glowing through the window, the lens still cradled in my palms. Sometimes, the past doesn't disappear. Sometimes, it just comes home in its own time, wrapped in silence, demanding nothing, except that you be ready to hold it right.